Hello everyone, welcome to Edukemy's YouTube channel. I'm Nanki Baveja, faculty for economy at Edukemy. And as part of Edukemy's family, I am happy to announce a dedicated video series where we will be discussing each and every chapter or summary of chapters of economic survey. So अगर 10 chapter है इस बार के economic survey में, so there will be a video dedicated to each and every chapter where I am discussing today the chapter 1's summary. Before moving forward, if you wish to see more such video, then please hit the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new video with which Edukemy is coming up. And at the last, if you like the video, then please hit the like icon also, and do not forget to subscribe and share it further. Now, talking about the chapter 1 summary, chapter 1 may basically they have talked about two major things, or the chapter 1 can be studied into two major parts. The first one being, it gives you a brief description about macroeconomic stability of the country. Another thing which chapter 1 talks about is the strategy which was adopted by the government of India as a response to the multiple waves of pandemic. अब हम ये नहीं बोल सकते कि there were two severe waves of pandemic in the country with the onset of this Omicron variant of virus. They were, or you can call it as multiple waves of pandemic that has affected the global economy. So chapter 1 also talks about a unique strategy that was adopted by the government of India as a response to the multiple waves of pandemic in our country. So let us start with sectoral trends. We will keep on analyzing sectoral trends, and in the end we will throw some light and discuss about the strategy that was adopted by the government of India. Now, starting with the three major sectors, which covers agriculture, industry, and service sector. Now, talking about the agricultural sector, this has been the least impacted one. This has been the least impacted one with the pandemic, and if you see the service sector, इसका अगर हम trend analyze करें, it has been the worst affected one out of these three. And how? Because there was fall in the demand of the services, and especially those services where an element of human contact was present. Services like tourism, aviation, hotel industry. These services, if we focus upon, have actually contracted. Their demand was almost nil during the first wave of pandemic, and even the second wave also, if you see, these were the least demanded one. And if we bifurcate service sector further, services like finance and real estate did well because of less human contact. But if we talk about the overall service sector, the growth rate has actually contracted to negative territory, but it has managed to cope up well even before the pre-pandemic time. पहले 7.2% था, this is pre-pandemic time, and now in 2021-22, the advanced estimates tells us that it has regained its momentum with 8.2% of growth rate administered. Now, if we talk about the agricultural sector, this is the least impacted one. This you should remember from exams perspective as well as general awareness perspective also, that agricultural sector was the least impacted one. Two reasons that could be attributed to it is timely government intervention and the migration. If you remember, जब first wave और first lockdown हुआ था country में in April 2020, in fact March, middle of March was the time in 2020 when first nationwide lockdown was imposed. तो बहुत ज़्यादा माइग्रेशन हुआ था लेबर का, and labor actually went back to rural areas and joined the agriculture sector because they don't have any other option to join to or get employed. Along with the timely government intervention in the form of supply of seeds and fertilizers. Seeds plus fertilizers helped the sector to sustain well. Not even that, the demand side of the agriculture sector was also managed by the government because there was demand that was there by the government distributing free goods, distributing free grains to the ration card holders, and that actually helped in maintaining the demand side of the agriculture sector also. So that's why we can say that this was the least impacted one, and in fact the figures also supported the same. And the service sector, which involved more of human contact like hotel industry, aviation sector, travel industry, it actually fell and went to the negative territory. Now talking about the last one in the slide, it is the industry sector. It was already contracting in the pre-pandemic time to be negative 1.2. Then it fell even more. The situation aggravated with the first lockdown imposed in year 2020, and it went to negative 7.0. But again, it also managed to cope up well, and thanks to the spending by the government in the infrastructure sector, that the industries also, in the sector also outperformed the pre-pandemic level, which is recording a growth rate of 11.8%. So this is the sectoral analysis of these three sectors. Now we will move on to the next set of data that we have to analyze. जो next set है, it talks about the demand analysis. The sector which outperformed here is the export sector, if you see, which was contracting during the pre-pandemic time but regained its momentum to administer a growth rate of 16.5%. And not just only export is what that regained its momentum, but with the opening up of economy, and domestic demand going up, imports at the same time, which fell during the first wave of lockdown, also regained to 29.4% of growth rate. भाई फर्स्ट वेव ऑफ पैंडेमिक में जब क्या हुआ था, बिल्कुल ही डिमांड खत्म हो गई थी, डोमेस्टिक डिमांड थी ही नहीं, तो इंपोर्ट करने की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ रही थी, है ना. इसलिए यहाँ पे क्या फिगर आ रहा है, 13.6% का. बट जैसे ही लॉकडाउन्स हटे, द इकोनॉमी रिवैम्प्ड इट्स ग्रोथ रेट and the domestic demand also started coming up to register a growth rate of 29.4%. Hence, import also increased. Now, when we talk about the demand side, the demand side came from the government sector and not from the private consumption. Private consumption, if you see the data, 5.5 is the figure for pre-pandemic time. Then it contracted 9.1, negative 9.1. But after the pandemic, it is 6.9, though fair enough or performing far better than what it was pre-pandemic time. But when we compare between the government consumption and the private consumption, government consumption performed far better than what private consumption did. So it is around 7.6%. It owes to the increased expenditure by the government in infrastructure sector, and that is what spurred the government consumption side. So this is the key data that we need to know from the demand side or the demand analysis when we do. Now let's move on to the another important parameter, which is the vaccination. Vaccination is just not a health indicator anymore. It is now a parameter to gauge the macroeconomic stability of the country, because it is based on this. The investors take their decision, and that is where an economy gains confidence as to how much or how much portion of population is being administered with the doses of vaccination. So you should know this data that 93% of the population of our country has been administered with the first dose, and a striking data is that around 70% of the population is there which has been administered the two doses, matlab they are doubly vaccinated. And that is why this could be the probable reason that the third wave that came wasn't that much fatal, because लोगों को दो वैक्सीन, एटलीस्ट 70% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन को डबल डोज लग चुकी है. And that is why जो third wave where Omicron was there couldn't hit the health that badly as the variant of COVID did in year 2021. So it helps in boosting the confidence of the investor in any particular economy. That's why vaccination is no more a just health indicator, but it has now been counted as a macroeconomic indicator. So ये data तो हो गया हमारा vaccination के बारे में. Now let's see what do we have to study more. In this one, we will talk about, in this slide, we have data related to balance of payment. So India's balance of payment was in surplus throughout, which actually led to accumulation of forex reserves to the extent that in December 2021, the forex balance of a country touched its all-time high. So you see, the balance of payment is in surplus, right? It is in surplus. So this is the line. Before this or below this, if it fails, it will move to the negative territory. But it was in surplus, which actually led to the accumulation of forex reserves. And it's a very important data from any exam point of view that the India's forex reserve touched its all-time high around 634 billion US dollars in December 2021. So this data you should know, this you should remember. Now the next set of data that we need to study is the fiscal and the primary deficit. This is one such data जिस पे सबकी नजर होती है that how much deficit is there in the country. So to the surprise that it is again fell before the pre-pandemic level, and thanks to the good amount of tax collection with which the government supported its expenditure. So if you see the data for fiscal deficit, it was standing at the 8.1% of the GDP, which actually fell to 7.0 or 7% after the pandemic. It actually shooted up during the first wave of pandemic because of the increased expenditure by the government in the health side. And so goes with the primary deficit. It increased during the first wave of pandemic because of the increase in expenditure by the government. But government managed it well so that it started contracting and it came to 2.4. As compared to the pre-pandemic level, it was 4.7 and it fell to 2.4. And same goes with the fiscal deficit. इसमें भी क्या हुआ है? Fall or decrease register किया गया है. It was 8.1 and it went to 7.0 after the pandemic. And thanks to the collection, both in direct and indirect taxes, which grew with time. If you see, for the corporate tax, it was somewhere around here in the pre-pandemic time, but it also registered growth. Same as for the other taxes, direct taxes. It was here before pre-pandemic time, and again it managed to increase. And so goes with the indirect taxes over here. GST collection also went up. So this actually supported the expenditure by the government. And that is why the deficit level of the country is in control. Next set of data that we have to study is from the financial sector of the country. And you should know before we proceed here is that financial sector forms the backbone of any economy. अगर इस sector में जो financial sector है, if there's any crisis, then it actually deters the growth rate. It deters the growth rate of the country. So in order that the growth rate to be maintained, the financial sector has to be or has to perform really well. There could be no situation, or any economy could not afford any situation of crisis in the financial sector. So here we will analyze two sets of data. First is the capital adequacy ratio and the other one is the gross NPAs as well as the net NPAs. और NPAs क्या होता है? Non-performing assets. Non-performing assets of scheduled commercial bank is what we will study here. And if you see, it has actually fallen in the or with the pandemic time. Everyone was expecting that the situation would have got aggravated with NPAs of scheduled commercial bank rising due with the waves of pandemic. But with the good policies in place, the NPA has actually, or the NPA level has actually fallen over a period of time when you compare it with when it was at all-time high. Twin balance sheet syndrome, अगर आपने सुना हो तो that was one thing with which our economy was suffering during the period 2016 and 17, where the NPAs of the SCBs was all-time high. और अगर आप देख रहे हैं तो इसमें भी there was a fall that was, or a decrease that was registered, and thanks to the capital adequacy ratio that was maintained by the bank throughout. So financial sector actually served as a backbone of our country during the waves of pandemic, due to which the country is again back on the trajectory of growth. Next is inflation. So this is one such thing that has been talk of the town everywhere or around the globe, because inflation on the global level has reappeared. It is not just that India is suffering from inflation or witnessing inflation, it is that the global level inflation has reappeared, and the reasons that could be attributed as increase in fuel prices. बहुत बड़ा reason है इसका. Another is supply side constraints. Like, if you know that there was shortage of ships that are used to transport material or transport goods from one country to another. Acute shortage हो गई थी इनकी during the pandemic time, and that actually increased the transport cost. Now, if the transport cost gets increased, or what we call as freight cost, if that gets increased, it will automatically get reflected in the retail prices. Retail price is the final price. भाई transportation cost बढ़ रही है तो retail or the final price will also get affected. No, वो भी तो increase होगा. And if that gets increased on the overall level, then the inflation level in the country would certainly increase. Now, if you see the inflation, though here was around 6.6%, which went out of the tolerance band, for which for India is around 2 to 6%. India का tolerance band क्या है आपको पता होना चाहिए ना? It is between 2 to 6%. If the inflation goes out of this level or falls below this level, the RBI has to submit a report to the government stating the reasons that why the inflation is not in the tolerance band. And that happened here. But after that, the inflation was well maintained in the tolerance level. But if you see the WPI actually went into the double digit category. Initially, it went into the negative category. If you see, this is the zero degree, and before it fell before rising into the, or it went to the negative side. Now the WPI is into double digit, around say 14%, and the reason is rising fuel prices in the global world. Fuel prices, which we also called as imported inflation, because in India we are dependent on the other countries for our fuel and energy. So that is why the WPI is rising. Next in line, we have a unique strategy which was adopted by the government of India to tackle the pandemic that was there in our country. So I hope you are familiar with this figure. ये कहाँ देखा है आपने? You must have seen it in your gyms. ठीक है? It's called barbell. Barbell, which has two sides to it. दो sides होती हैं इसकी, and the two sides to it here are agile response and the safety net. Now what is agile? What does agile mean? क्या मतलब होता है agile का? Agile is something which is very flexible. Agile is something which is very flexible and which can be changed easily. So agile response is one such thing that the government of India adopted. I will tell you one example and with which you will be easily able to relate as to what agile response or agile way of making strategy is. So for example, what happened during the first wave? First wave में क्या हुआ था? All of a sudden lockdown. There was a sudden lockdown. Even before this, one thing that you need to know about agile response is, under agile strategy, you make a plan, you see its impact. You make a plan, you see what impact it has created. Studying this impact, you again replan the things and study the impact, and you keep on doing this. And the impact, how do you study the impact? With the use of the data, or say real-time data or high frequency data. किसी भी चीज का impact कैसे पता चलेगा आपको? You need to have data in your hand. A data that can be collected really quick. That is why what is called real-time data or high frequency data. And that is what the government adopted to manage the situation of crisis. So what the government did was, during the first wave, the government imposed sudden lockdown, right? याद हो आपको तो? What was the agenda to impose the sudden lockdown? It was to halt the people where they are, so that the people stop moving, stop commuting, so that the spread of the virus could be curbed. ये intention था government का. But हुआ क्या था? To the contrary, people started moving. People started migrating. Migration increased and the spread also increased. So what the government plan is, to curb the spread of disease, we will impose a lockdown. We will see the impact of it and then change our strategy. Impact and then change our strategy. So the government imposed the lockdown, saw that people are not stopping where they are, instead they are migrating, or they have started migrating, and the spread have increased. So did you notice the same, or did you witness the same during the second lockdown? No, there was not a sudden lockdown that was being imposed. People were given time to commute from one place to another. Aviation sector was also not totally called off. There were services that was not halted when it comes to railways also. The borders were not closed in order to not create a threat in the minds of people that they will be halted where they are. The government ने क्या किया? They planned. They saw that it is not going in the direction that they are thinking or that they have thought of, and they immediately changed their strategy or implemented a new strategy during the second wave of pandemic. And that is what flexibility is, and that is what agility is. And that is what is called agile response. Agile response to whatever comes on the face of the government, they will change their strategy quickly according to that. And if their plan goes wrong, they have cushioning, or they have cushions to support in case the planning goes wrong. So those cushions were provided those cushions were provided in the form of safety nets. Now, safety nets is what were certain schemes which were there for certain section of the people in the society, like distribution of food grains, cylinders, cash transfers. All of this was in place so that the vulnerable section of the society does not get hampered or does not have to suffer if the plan goes wrong. So this is what is about the Barbell strategy and the agile response, which is very important. It is in total contrast with the waterfall approach. इसका बिल्कुल opposite होता है. Waterfall approach में planning is done on the basis of previous data, and the government sticks to the plan no matter what. यहाँ पे तो क्या कर रही थी, गवर्नमेंट देखती थी impact and they used to change the strategy as per the need of the time or the demand of the time. But in case of waterfall approach, what happens is plans are made depending on the previous year data, and then the government sticks to the plan no matter what situation takes place. But in case of barbell strategy, there are two sides to it. One is the agile response, which is flexible, which can be changed according to the changing scenario of the country, and there were cushions in place to provide safety or to secure the vulnerable section of the society. So this is what is there important that you need to know from the chapter 1 of the economic survey. I think ये काफी interesting था कि कैसे गवर्नमेंट ने चीजें प्लान करी हैं. गवर्नमेंट ने एक बहुत ही flexible mechanism adopt किया है so that the things could be kept in control, and that is what you need to know. This is something very probable, or this is very important from mains point of view. You need to know what this strategy is. And when we talk from the prelims point of view, the data that you need to focus on is these level of inflation, then that the level of NPA has been consistently falling. Consistent fall यहाँ पे register किया गया है. So these are certain trends that you need to focus on जब आप economic survey पढ़ रहे हैं, right? Now, the fall in the level of fiscal and primary deficit. Everyone would have expected, or everyone, if a layman thinks, he would think that the deficit level would have gone up. But to the surprise, due to the good amount of collection of taxes, it has fallen. तो ये चीजों पे आपको ध्यान देना है जब आप पढ़ रहे हैं. So with this, I wind up my first lecture or first video with the video series economic survey. In the next video, we will talk about in detail of the fiscal developments that have taken place and that have been provided in the economic survey. So we will be discussing the summary of chapter 2 in the next video. Till then, please stay updated with hitting the bell icon, and I wish you all the best and have a good day.